Sociolinguistics, a broad overview of the development of sociolinguistics by Elaine Ridgway. Good afternoon, and welcome to my presentation on the subdiscipline of sociolinguistics, in which we will discuss the chronological development of sociolinguistics and examine the theoretical, linguistic, and stylistic concepts reflecting the power of language. The chronological timeline of the development of sociolinguistics. In the 1800s, George Winker. Winker founded the field of the sociology of language. 1890s, Joseph Wright. Wright produced the English Dialect Dictionary in 1905. 1939, Thomas Callan Hodgson. Hodgson was the first person to name the discipline as sociolinguistics. In the 1950s, John Gumperz. Gumperz influenced discourse analysis. 1957, Noam Chomsky. Chomsky's studies revealed that all languages held similar structures. In the 1960s, Del Hymes. Hymes developed an ethnography-based sociolinguistics. It focused on communicative competence. 1966, William Labov. Labov's work revealed structure within linguistics, revealing patterns of pronunciation. In 1974, Peter Trudgill. Trudgill's work examined the link between language and society. 1982, John Wells. Wells's study into accents resulted in his theory of the foot-strut divide. All these linguists have made important contributions to the development of sociolinguistics, most notably Chomsky, Labov, Trudgill, and Wells. Sociolinguistics. The term sociolinguistics was first used by Thomas Callan Hodgson in 1939 in his article Sociolinguistics in India, published in the magazine Man in India. It was later in 1957 when Noam Chomsky challenged the perceptions regarding linguistics held by philosophers and psychologists in his book Syntactic Structures, 1957. Chomsky argued that it was the nature of language to the nature of mind, rather than vice versa. Smith, Wilson, 1990. Chomsky's theories demonstrated the reversal of the relationship between linguistics, philosophy, and psychology. One of Chomsky's main contributions to this field, Smith, Wilson, 1990. The development of sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistics gained momentum in the 1960s due to the work of William Labov with The Social Stratification of English in New York City, published in 1966, and Peter Trudgill with Sociolinguistics, An Introduction to Language and Society, published in 1974, as a response to Chomsky's work. The combined work of Labov and Trudgill enables sociolinguistics to become recognized as a branch or subdiscipline of linguistics in its own right. Labov and Trudgill were considered to be among the founders of sociolinguistics, along with Chomsky, Gumperz, and Hymes. Defining sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistics may be defined as the study of language in relation to society, Lyons, 1981. This included context and what is culturally acceptable in terms of language. Linguist Robert Hudson held the view that the basic concept of language is that it is constantly evolving, becoming variable, examines how language is used in society. Trudgill argued that sociolinguistics is based upon the theory that language is representative of social behaviour and social interaction, including differences in class, gender, and geographical location. Descriptivism or prescriptivism. When observing the field of sociolinguistics, the areas of descriptivism and prescriptivism need to be taken into consideration. Descriptivism focused on how people use language rather than the rules of correct usage, which includes the reflection of how different groups in society use language in dissimilar ways, whereas prescriptivism concentrated upon describing languages as we would like them to be, correct, as opposed to how we really find them. Prescriptivism followed the rules of traditional English with no contractions of the words, such as ain't and can't. Churchill criticised prescriptivism, explaining that the format of prescriptivism resulted in the speaker feeling insecure and inarticulate, and that it is based upon a false premise. Churchill, 2016. Research methods. In order to aid the development of sociolinguistics, the collection of data from the studies into the subdiscipline were conducted by various methods. Early research was organised manually. However, much of this work is now driven by computer analysts. These studies determined whether the language used was appropriate or inappropriate. It analysed the grammar and the vocabulary of the sociolects which were explored in the studies. The sociolinguistic interview. A technique where data is collected by recording different speech patterns and in what context they are used. This included conversation, both formal and informal, which would require the subject to recount past personal experiences so that a natural pattern of speech may be observed, and also by reading a passage from a book. Other methods, such as surveys and questionnaires, polling and postal mediums, were employed by early linguists such as Chomsky, Laboff, and Churchill. Ethnography. Del Hymes, who was also credited with being a linguistic anthropologist, developed an ethnography-based sociolinguistics and communicative competence, which enabled a means of research where data is collected by observing people in their natural environments in order to understand how the language is used within social interactions. Corpus analysis, the modern approach. Corpus analysis is a modern perspective to the sociolinguistic research method, where large collections of data are compiled and analysed to identify speech patterns and the relationship between other languages. This computer-based means of analysis revealed two further areas of research, qualitative and quantitative, which were introduced in the 1980s. The linguistic landscape. This method of research is a study of how language is publicly visible through the analysis of commercial signs and advertisements. This important method of research provides information about people's backgrounds and their daily lives. It also informs the researcher of the individual's identity and of their social interaction. Linguistic anthropology. This is an interdisciplinary framework which employs theoretical models for multidisciplines, for instance, language acquisition, speech scenes, and psycholinguistics, demonstrating how language influences social life. The linguistic anthropology framework is closely connected with the work of ethnography and sociolinguistics by Hymes. The field of sociolinguistics illustrates how cultural representation in society have particular differences, such as ethnicity, religion, gender, status, and age. Hudson, 1996. Influencing factors considered within the field of sociolinguistics. The study of sociolinguistics identifies how language is expressed in terms of social context with regard to class, identity, gender, politics, race, and religion. These influencing factors demonstrate how cultural representation in society has identifiable differences. These also include status, age, and ethnicity. These social aspects of language link to dialect. Dialect is the form of language spoken by a social group in a specific region of a country. This in turn relates to identity and social class, as perceptions are formed upon the choice of words an individual uses from that particular region in forming their idiolect. The importance of the social role of language. Churchill wrote that regarding what a person says and how a person speaks, being two important aspects of language behaviour from a social point of view. Churchill, 1983. Further studies conducted into language and society in its social context were conducted by Churchill, who published the material in his book, Introducing Language and Society, in 1992. Churchill explained that the primary aspect of language behaviour demonstrates the function of language in establishing social relationships, and the secondary function of language is to identify and reveal details regarding a person's social class and background. Churchill, 1983. This includes information on profession and geographical location, in which these influencing factors reflect the importance of the social role of language. Subdisciplines of sociolinguistics. Churchill's work revealed further subdisciplines or branches within the field of sociolinguistics, which link to the work of other notable linguists such as Hymes, Laboff, and Wells. These subdisciplines are accents and dialects, language and social class, language and ethnic groups, language and sex, language and context, and language and geography. Churchill, 1983. The Foot-Strut Divide, Wells, 1982. At around the same time as the work of Churchill, The Accents of English, Wells, 1982, and his study, The Foot-Strut Divide, was published, also 1982. Wells's study supported Churchill's theories regarding the connection between language and social class, and language and geographical location. Wells explained his theory of the Foot-Strut Divide is demonstrated as being relatable to the North-South divide of speakers from their respective areas, with a focus on pronunciation. Wells states that Southern speakers place the emphasis on the vowel A, pronouncing words like strut as strat and cut as cat. However, Northern speakers place the emphasis on the vowel U in strut and in cut. The pronunciations observed in Wells's study also link to dialect and accent. Dialect and accent. The dialect and the accent may also be viewed in terms of traditional language, prescriptivist, and non-standard language, descriptivist, which aligns with Churchill's theories that dialect is based upon the geographical location of a speaker. For instance, a Scouse dialect is spoken in the Liverpool area, whilst accent reflects the pronunciation of certain words, which would support Wells's study on the foot-strut divide. Language, sociolect and idiolect. The relationship between the sociolect of a person, the idiolect, and the language they use relate closely to the individual's social and economic background. The sociolect examine the theory of how different groups affect the language that is spoken, whilst the idiolect examines specific words in language that a person chose to use. The power of language in society. The power of language, how it is used, and its effect upon society demonstrates a person's social identity and status. For instance, the language used by solicitors in a courtroom, the legal terms and addresses, would be considerably different to the type of language used in everyday life or by people meeting in the street. The linguistic differences recognised in languages spoken by specific groups are also an indication of their particular ethnic identity. Further studies into this area by Laboff in 1996 and 2001 and Kahn in 2006 illustrate the linguistic variation in connection with identity, status, sex, ethnicity, and age. Ethnicity and sociolinguistics. To define ethnicity in terms of sociolinguistics, Kahn, 2006, wrote that it was a collection of individuals who share common factors. This included key themes, for instance, culture, customs, religion, geographical location, race and language. Kahn's work also aligned with Churchill's theories regarding the relation of sociolect and idiolect in connection with the cultural and economic backgrounds of the individuals within those groups. Sociolinguistics, the conclusion. In this presentation, sociolinguistics was identified as a subdiscipline of linguistics, which has many subdisciplines within the field of sociolinguistics. The methods of determining the relationship between language and how it is used in society were observed. The work of prominent linguists, Chomsky, Churchill and Laboff, were recognised, and their methods of research and their developmental work into the study of sociolinguistics were also observed. Key themes and influencing factors within the field of sociolinguistics were also considered. The subdisciplines of language and social class, and language and geography were illustrated, and these areas will be covered in greater detail in the literary review assignment. The field of sociolinguistics is constantly evolving, with language being representative of social interaction with society, affecting the language spoken in specific areas. Thank you for listening.